Hello, everyone. Welcome. We're so glad to have you with us this morning for a virtual meeting with some of our live animals. Thank you so much for joining us. My name is Rachel, and I work with the education team at the Natural History Museum. Now, as you can tell, I'm not at the museum right now. I'm at home like many of you, but we do have some amazing staff that still need to go into the museum to care for our living animals that call the museum home. Now, you might be surprised to learn that the museum even has live animals, but we do have over 100 different species of living animals that are in places like our Nature Lab, the new Bugtopia exhibit in the Discovery Center, and some that live behind the scenes, and which you're actually going to get to see today. Now, as I said, we'll try to get to as many questions as we can, but in case we don't get to answer your question today, I encourage you to record your ideas and your questions so you can learn more about the animals we see on your own. So if you'd like, go ahead and grab a piece of paper and a pencil so you can record your experience while you're watching today. You can note down any of those questions you have, maybe a few facts you've learned, or draw or write a description of what some of the animals look like. So let's get started. I'm going to switch off my camera and switch it over to Forrest so we can meet our live animals today, and you'll see me again in a little bit. Hey, Forrest.
Hey, Rachel. Hi, everyone. Well, today I thought I'd talk about overwintering. The season's changing, it's getting colder and colder, and I thought maybe you were wondering what happens to all the insects and spiders during the winter time. Sorry. So not all insects and spiders are able to escape the winter, but some are able to, and some just most have to stay in the habitat where they live, right? We all know that monarchs are able to migrate all the way down from the frozen tundra of Canada down to Mexico and overwinter there where it's nice and sunny. Now, some of the monarchs live in California and go to a special part of California. Some are going to Florida. So there's kind of a complicated thing that's going on with the monarchs. But the point is that most insects and spiders especially can't migrate at all. They have to stay where they are and cope with the conditions. And how do they do that? Well, there's lots of different ways that they do that, right? Because there's a huge variety of insects and spiders, so much variety, so many different ways of coping. And it doesn't freeze everywhere, right? Some places it gets a little cold, some places it gets really cold. And so it just depends on where they are and who they are. But most of them will crawl into a burrow and get a lot of warmth and protection that way. So they can get underneath the ice, they can get in leaf litter, they can crawl into a crack. And usually what a spider will do is they'll go into a hibernation phase, sort of. They'll pull all their legs in close to their body and just kind of wait it out until the temperatures get a little bit warmer and they can detect that there's food for them to go out and eat. But it depends on the type of spider. Now, most spiders, like orb weavers, don't live through the winter as an adult, okay? So that's not part of their life cycle. Their life cycle is to be an adult during the warm parts of the year and then overwinter as a spiderling. We're going to talk about that a little bit more in a minute. But other creatures are able to use a part of their life cycle that's actually aquatic because there's lots of warmth actually in the water. And so a dragonfly nymph spends most of its life as a nymph living in a pond or a stream or a lake under the water where it's not frozen. And there's lots of food for them down there to eat. And so they actually thrive during the winter months. And then eventually they will go through metamorphosis, crawl out of the water, stretch their wings for the first time and fly away and become an adult dragonfly. But they spend most of their life aquatic underneath the water, safe from the winter. But what is so bad about winter? It's not so much the cold that's dangerous, it's freezing that's the problem. So what is freezing and why is that a problem? Well, most life is composed of cells, right? All life is composed of cells, and most of those cells are water. And when water changes from a liquid to a solid, ice crystals form, and those crystals if they form inside of our cells, can cause a lot of damage, irreparable damage to the cells. And so that's a problem. And one way that they've evolved around it is to actually evolve a type of antifreeze. Now, the ones that can escape freezing have evolved a type of antifreeze that they produce inside their bodies. Like we pour antifreeze in our car engines to keep our car engines from cracking when the water in our engine changes phase into a solid. We don't want to crack our engine block, so we'll pour antifreeze in there. They can produce antifreeze in their own bodies, which is absolutely amazing. And so they are considered to be freeze tolerant and sometimes even freeze resistant. Let's look at a snow spider. These are interesting spiders that are really thriving on the snow because there are other things out there that can produce that antifreeze, and they have things to eat because they're eating things that are also freeze tolerant, like crane flies. Crane flies are really cool flies that look like giant mosquitoes out there on the snow, living it up. And then another thing that's really interesting are these things called snow fleas. These are a type of little teeny tiny insect called a springtail is another name for it. If you've ever lived in a place that snows, you'll get a nice snow, and then you go out the next day and the snow will kind of look like it's all dirty. And then you're walking around and you see the snow start to like, all this dirt is vibrating everywhere. Those are the snow fleas. Snow fleas come out in mass, but what are they eating if everything's dead? Well, they eat all the leaves that fall from the trees. They are detritivores. And then other things will go out and eat the snow fleas. They're teeny tiny. They're about the size of a piece of pepper that you would pour on their food. They're that small, but I think they're pretty cute. Really like snow fleas. But if we look at spiders again, so what are the orb weavers doing? Right? It's part of their life cycle that the adult orb weavers, the females will lay their eggs, and then that's the end of their life cycle. But all their spiderlings are all cuddled up cozy inside of an egg sac, right? One woven egg sac is a protective shell for all of those hundreds and hundreds of eggs. And what are they doing? Well, a lot of them do emerge during the wintertime, but they're in their protective egg sac eating the yolk of the eggs that they hatched out of. And so they are still getting warmth and nutrition even through the winter months. Until eventually the season starts to change, daylight hours get longer, it gets warmer and warmer. Then they'll eventually find their way outside of the egg sac and spread out, balloon away from one another with their silk, and find a place to spin their first web and start off a brand new season for them, for their new life cycle. Other things that are able to survive winter months that we can look at are moths, right? Moths are really hardy, and so are butterflies as well. And so where do they go during the winter, right? They don't go extinct, which means that they all died out and now we're not going to have any next year in the spring and summer. They're overwintering in another life stage. And so a moth will, when it's time for it to pupate or spin a cocoon, the larval stage has silk spigots, like a spider has a silk spigot on its abdomen. They have it in their jaws. And so the caterpillar will weave a cocoon, a full cocoon. It depends on the species as to what the cocoon will look like, and we'll look at different types, but a lot of them will take a leaf and weave a cocoon around or inside of a leaf and incorporate it as part of this winter structure, this weather protection structure. And inside of the cocoon, right, is the developing pupa. And they look just like little mummies in there, all perfect. And it's just like a cozy, smooth room for them to go through metamorphosis safe and protected and warm. So let's look at some of the things that I have here. First thing that we're going to look at are giant atlas moth cocoons. These are some of those woven cocoons that are silken structures. You can kind of see where the leaf was. So this is the stem of the leaf here. Comes all the way around. These are some of the veins of the leaf. And inside of this is the pupa. Can you hear it in there rattling around? That's the pupa, and they're developing. And we can look at one that I've slid open so that we can see the pupa inside. Let's turn the light on. There she is. She's in there snug as a bug. Developing. Now, moths, like spiders, have an incredibly high reproductive rate. One female will lay hundreds and hundreds of eggs in her lifetime. They don't all make it because there's so much that can happen. They are an important part of the food chain for other animals. And this is one that was emerging from her pupa, but did not make it. And so she will become a part of the life cycle for food chain for another animal. I thought that's really interesting. So you can see how they Houdini out of the top here. And this is another type of moth that is tropical. And so her cocoon doesn't have to be as winterized, as weatherproof, because right in the tropics, we don't have harsh winters. It stays pretty much a consistent temperature year round. And this is the giant Atlas moth adult. Can you just see how huge she is? She's so big. This is my hand, and this is the moth. Really big. But I wanted to zoom in close on some of her other ways in which they'll stay warm is they actually have a lot of what look like feathers, right? That's a form of wing scale that's very feathery here. It adds extra insulation from the cold. Really, really amazing. Now let's look at some spider egg sacs. So here's a spider egg sac here, and it's silk woven structure attached to a leaf. If you go out in the wintertime and once you get an eye for these things, you can try to find them in parks, maybe in your yard. If you've had a garden spider living in your yard throughout the spring, maybe you'll be able to find some of their egg sacs. And so inside of this are, 100 to 500 individual eggs. Each egg has a teeny tiny baby spider inside of it. She will eat her way out of the egg and then continue to eat the egg yolk throughout the winter time as a source of nutrition. And I wanted to also show you what a larger spider would do. So this is a tarantula that has woven a huge web for warmth during the winter months, and protection as a shelter. So there are so many different ways that they can survive the winter months. Now, some even tolerate freezing, right? So an antifreeze would keep them from freezing, but some actually tolerate freezing. And so they will freeze and they will sacrifice some of their cells of their body. And they know exactly which ones they're going to sacrifice to this freezing, but then they will emerge just as alive as they can be when they thaw out and the winter breaks. All right, I'm going to come back up to my camera and we can answer any questions that you might have.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Forrest. So many cool things that we learned about with hibernating insects. I didn't know so many of those cool facts. So we had a couple questions. I'll start off with some spider questions. We had Vincent asking, are spiders cold-blooded or warm-blooded or neither?
Right, they're ectotherms, cold-blooded, as all invertebrates are. So they can't control their body temperature the way that we do, where we control the heating and cooling system with our metabolism. They are kind of more dependent on what's going on the outside. So that's sitting in the sun or getting away from the sun if it's too hot. That's called being an ectotherm. Reptiles are the same way.
Very cool. Learning some new vocabulary, ectotherm. Harper was asking how many eggs are in an egg sac, and Cadence was similarly curious, how do mom spiders get so many baby spiders in one big egg sac?
Right. So they could be anywhere, depends on the species and how well fed the mom is, like from 100 to 500. And she, extrudes them one at a time from her abdomen and creates kind of a layer of slime over the egg sac, which keeps them all together so they're not all just everywhere. They're in a kind of like a congealed mass, oily and stuff, so they don't dry out with this layer of slime. And then from there, she'll wrap the cocoon around that slime ball. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that when we talk about slime in the upcoming weeks.
Very cool.
Good question.
Alexis was curious, can spiders camouflage in the snow, or do they just are they out there in the snow just doing their thing in their kind of darker colors that we saw?
Yeah, that's a good one. Yeah, they're not camouflaging, that's for sure. But there's also not a lot of predators out there with them, but there are some for sure. And so they are at risk, and they are going to get eaten by things that like to eat spiders. Yep.
Got it. We had a couple questions also about moths, so I'll jump to our moth questions for a bit here. Matt was curious, how long does a giant silk moth live?
Well, they live for a long time as a caterpillar. So when I say a long time for a moth caterpillar, that's about 3 to 6 months. That's a really, really long time for a caterpillar. And then another 3 to 6 months as a pupa. Now, the one that I'm talking about is this one that I showed you. This is the giant silk moth. So it has to get really big, so it spends more time in development than a smaller moth would, but not very long as an adult. So as an adult, they only live a few days. They don't have any mouth parts, so they're just living off all the food that they ate as a caterpillar. And so this is the reproductive stage where the female will hunker down in one place, emit a pheromone, and the male will come and try to find her, using his gigantic noses, which are his antenna. And they'll mate, she'll lay her eggs, and that will be the end of their life cycle.
Wow.
So they spend most of their lives as teenagers, you could say. That's their heyday.
So cool. Dudley was curious, is that the biggest moth in the world, the Atlas moth that you showed us?
Yeah, it is. It's from Southeast Asia. So that's like the Malaysia area. It's definitely the biggest.
Awesome. Joel was curious, and you talked a little bit about this, but maybe you can share a little bit further, how they create the cocoon. He's just really wondering and so curious about how that process works.
Right. You should watch a time-lapse video of it. And so, like I said, she has silk spigots. So she has silk glands inside of her head that she draws the silk out. And so she'll find a surface, the leaf that she's going to pupate on, and go back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, creating this first layer. And then once that first layer is built, flip around this way and come this way and go back and forth until she has the full structure. And then once she has the structure woven, she'll unzip her caterpillar skin and the next shell will be the pupal shell, and that's kind of like that dormant phase. But it's, you know, it's just an intense weaving of pulling silk out from her jaws and crisscrossing back and forth, you know, to create these really incredibly strong woven, you know, I'm pulling really, really hard on this. It's not going anywhere. Structures. They're really incredible.
That's some impressive engineering.
Yeah.
Giselle is wondering, are moths part of the butterfly family? Maybe you can tell us a little bit about the differences between moths and butterflies.
So they're under the same family called Lepidoptera, and then moths evolved first on the planet when the planet was didn't have the flowering plants that butterflies need, and it was darker and it was colder and they were all nocturnal. And then the planet started to change. We had the flowering plants evolve on the planet, and so some moths diverged into butterflies and became day-flying, essentially day-flying moths. Now, a Lepidopterus that studies butterflies and moths, most of them consider moths or butterflies to be moths. They're just day-flying butterflies. And so, you know, some people make that distinction and some people don't, but they're definitely related.
Very cool. We had a couple questions about the cocoon you were handling, and Dr. Lasnover was asking about it. Adrian, Zoe, and Desi also had some questions. Is it okay to handle the pupa at this stage? Will that harm the moth? Or will you speak to kind of handling the pupa?
So these, there aren't any viable ones in these, but yes, this is a very strong and protective structure. If I were to crush it, that would hurt the developing. There's not one in here developing, by the way. That would hurt what was inside. But handling these are perfectly fine. That's true. One thing that I can show you, and this is a butterfly pupa that's also overwintering. One way that we overwinter these is we actually put them in the refrigerator, and they do just fine. So they like to, you see it wiggling? They overwinter in the refrigerator, and then in the spring, when it's time for us to open up the butterfly pavilion, we take them out of the refrigerator, hang them up in our emergence chamber. That's what you see back there, and emerge them as butterflies. So this turns into the giant swallowtail. It's the largest butterfly that we have in North America. It's that really big swallowtail that's yellow and black. But they can be handled carefully, right? No squeezing. And all of this is silk that I'm holding on to. So I'm holding it by the silk that it used to create the structure. It doesn't feel like wiggling again. So I got this from our we wear these in the butterfly pavilion, but we're in spider pavilion now. So we bring these in, put them in the refrigerator, and overwinter them until next year.
So I'm assuming putting them in the refrigerator kind of simulates like the winter climate that kind of helps them go into that overwintering process.
Exactly. Mm-hmm.
Very cool. Let's see, we have so many good questions coming in. Genesis is curious, you know, a lot of folks know that moths are attracted to light. Are all moths like that? Are all of them attracted to light that way?
Yes, many moths are attracted to the light. You know, why they're attracted to the light, we don't really know, but we know that other things that are attracted to the light, like say a praying mantis is attracted to the light because the moths are attracted to the light. So they go there to eat the other things that are being attracted to the light. It's probably because they navigate, though they can't see very well and their main navigation is by smell, they do have eyes. And so they can see a little bit, right? They can see lights and darks, and it kind of tricks them. Especially, you know, we think they use the light of the moon to navigate, and so when you have your porch light on, it can attract them by mistake.
Interesting. We have a related question, and you spoke a little bit to this, so maybe you can clarify a little bit more. Skyer was curious, how do moths talk? How do they communicate with one another?
Through smell. So it's all olfactory, so that they emit chemicals, invisible molecules in the air that they can't see, that we can't see, like a perfume, right? We smell perfume in order to smell better for ourselves and for other people, but we can't see it. And it's the same thing. It's a pheromone. It's molecules that are invisible in the air that they detect with these antennae. And so their antennae are incredibly feathery. That means there's a lot of surface area for those molecules to land on the receptor cells of the antenna. And so the more receptor cells there are, the more molecules that can land there, the better they can detect. So they communicate with these smells. Super cool.
Awesome. I have one more question for you. Max is curious, how do you know all these cool facts? And did you go to school for this?
I did go to school for this. So I studied ecology, evolution, and entomology in Texas, the University of Texas. And then I got lucky as soon as I got out of college. They started building insect zoos and butterfly pavilions. So I went to the Cockerel Butterfly Pavilion in Texas, and I worked there. I went to Smithsonian. They have a butterfly pavilion insect zoo. Went there, and then I came here, and it's great and learn all the way. Can only learn so much from school, but you can definitely learn a lot. You can learn a lot just by having your own insect zoo in your house, in your garage, or even your front yard, planting a little habitat. And you plant it, they will come. You'll see so many different things. It's really fun, cool thing to do.
That's awesome. Well, thank you so much for being with us today for us. This was a really cool presentation.
Thank you. I enjoyed it.
All right, friends, I'm going to go ahead and close us out of our program today. We thank you so much for joining us. We learned so much about overwintering, how insects hibernate during the winter. And if you want to see more of our live animal program, you can give them a follow on Instagram at NHMLA_live animals. We'll also have all the videos from these presentations for you to watch later. So you can watch this recording and others at youtube.com/NHMLA. We do this program every Thursday morning at 11:30, so we hope you'll see us again soon. Thank you so much for joining us.